And more about security guarantees, the future possible peace in Ukraine and beyond, we'll talk with Mr. Paul Niland. Greetings, Mr. Niland.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be back with you on the show again.
Thank you very much for coming. And today I have spoken on the episode more about the security guarantees possible for Ukraine when entering peace talks with Russia. We had a dialogue between President Zelensky and President-elect Trump in Paris, and Reuters sources signed that it was a good, productive conversation with President Zelensky being ready to discuss some security guarantees and possible outcomes of the current situation. What do you think about that? Is it possible?
So I think the best security guarantee really that Ukraine can continue to aim for is the destruction of the enemy's military capacity. And that's the only real security guarantee that Ukraine has. It is to stop Russia's ability to continue their war against this country. When it comes to the international dialogue about security guarantees for Ukraine, what we have to remember is that we've had um, uh, 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 multiple guarantees of Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, territorial integrity that have been signed and signed with Russia over the years. The chief among them, which also had international partners to it, was the Budapest Memorandum. Now, we can argue that the signatories to the Budapest Memorandum, when Ukraine gave up the world's third largest nuclear stockpile, the signatories to the Budapest Memorandum, namely the United States of America and the UK, later on France, have been stalwart allies of Ukraine since the full-scale invasion. Have they lived up to all of their obligations? Arguable and debatable. Russia is the party that absolutely tore up the obligations of the Budapest Memorandum. And so, if an international treaty is somehow once again required to provide security for Ukraine, then we really need to be looking at what the fine print of that is. But the simplest approach, and this is the one that I think simply relies on the majority of the people of Ukraine to be in favor of this, and then the majority of countries, in technical reality, all of the countries, a unanimity of the countries that are part of NATO, is to invite Ukraine into NATO, and therefore Ukraine will be protected forever. And that is what Ukraine has been insisting on for many, many years, and it's what the majority of Ukrainians want as well. There will be a few holdouts within NATO, but getting over them, getting over their objections, and once victory is secured, then inviting Ukraine into NATO with the protections of NATO, that's the security guarantee that we want and deserve.
And what about the Putin regime in Russia? Because the war could end very soon, as soon the regime itself crumbles in Moscow. We have seen the 3 days fall of Assad's regime in Syria being pressured by irregular rebels, well organized, yes, but still irregular forces that have been training and preparing for that, a blitzkrieg into Damascus, and Assad is gone. With Assad, it's a new age for Syria. Russia could not support Assad. They were not so quick to support Assad as their forces are engaged here in Ukraine. Maybe we can talk about the fall of Putin in Moscow, and then there will be some kind of treaty that can be followed.
You talk about the fall of Putin in Moscow, and instantly a smile comes across my face. I've seen a few women carrying bags around Kiev, which simply have the logo or the words on them. Sex is great and everything, but what about the death of Putin? Right? You've probably seen those. They're quite popular here. You know, I think with Assad, the speed of the fall of the Assad regime is the thing that surprised many. And I think listening to the experts, I think it's the thing that surprised the rebels themselves, that you know, this was beyond their wildest expectations to get. And I remember looking at Aleppo and thinking, my word, this is stunning. And then they just carried on going and negotiated their way through to what was by then a capital that had been left with a power vacuum, a void, because Assad had gone where all tyrants eventually have to go. It's the last safe haven for pariahs the world over. Assad went to Moscow, right? So, it is very instructive that regimes that seem to be incredibly strong and going nowhere, when they crumble fast. And with the march of the rebels through Syria from one place to the next, if you want to draw a parallel actually to Russia, look at what Prigozhin did. Now, first of all, what Prigozhin did was he told the truth. He made several statements before his mini mutiny, exposing the Russian lies at the heart of the war that he was an eager participant in, destroying Bakhmut and taking the pile of rubble that was left there. But Prigozhin told the truth. And then what he did was he took the Russian military headquarters in Rostov-on-Don without a fight. And then he started marching towards Moscow, or driving towards Moscow, and encountered very, very little resistance along the way. So, it was stunning when Prigozhin made his march to Moscow. But when you've seen now how things have ended for Assad, Putin is not paranoid. Paranoia is when you have a fear that people are out to get you, but it's not based in reality. Putin's fears are based in reality. He knows the fall of his regime. It could come from the military. It could come from a takeover, a coup, as we were just discussing with Prigozhin in Rostov. It could come from people power, as we've just seen in Syria. But his regime is very, very, very unstable. And in large part, it's unstable because of his reckless stupidity in thinking that he could invade and take over this country.
Well, this all requires time and resource. Will Ukraine have the time and, most importantly, resource to hold on while the regime will crumble? Because President-elect Donald Trump has hinted that the support for Ukraine may shrink when he enters House, and he will insist on negotiations right now. If negotiations are held right now, maybe it's not the position of strength that Ukraine needs.
So we have a couple of months to go until the inauguration, right? In that time, as much as the Biden administration can get out of the door and across to Ukraine, as much military equipment, material, ammunition, whatever, the Biden administration is trying to surge everything that it can so that Ukraine is in the best position by the time that Trump does take office. And then we have to look at what he's going to do. And you mentioned the one side potentially that has been floated is that if Ukraine refuses to come to the table, then potentially aid to Ukraine could be reduced. I'm seeing, including amongst Republicans, I'm seeing other attitudes, other lines of thinking that are coming forward, which is that Russia is on the ropes. Russia has lost in the next 2 days. It will tick over 760,000 dead and maimed Russian soldiers since the 24th of February, 760,000. And there are people on the Republican side who are saying, you know what, they've had a right kicking. They're not capable of really doing much more damage with what is left of their military. Let Ukraine finish them off. And that's the right kind of attitude. And the flip side to what Trump and some people around him are saying about potentially if Ukraine doesn't come to the table, the flip side of that is what also is being mentioned is an increase in aid to Ukraine should Putin not be genuine in opening discussions about where this might end. So. And I'm absolutely certain. I'm absolutely certain that whatever the first overtures are of how do we try to resolve this to the Kremlin, that they're going to be rejected. We know what the Kremlin's terms are. The Kremlin wants to take the rest of Zaporizhia, the rest of Kherson, all of Lugansk, Donetsk, and Crimea as a fait accompli. No, no, that is not going to happen. That's what Russia has been demanding up until now. They are the regions they've annexed on paper. But we will see when Trump takes power that his idea of fixing this fast was always a fallacy. And where it's really going to come unstuck is the attitudes of the Russians, because they can't stop this war. They are fully invested in it, and Putin will fall if the war in Ukraine ends.
You see, we can finish off the Russian side with long-range strikes, with Tomahawk missiles, with F-16, A-10 fighter jets and assault aircraft, but not with people, because a hell of a lot of people are enlisted, are mobilized into the army. Everyone is talking about this stagnation and fatigue because Russia is going on to the slaughter with their infantry. It's a huge, insane number of, mercenaries, of prisoners, other people. They're even mercenaries from African countries and Asia. They are coming in lines, and Ukrainian infantry is really exhausted, fighting that off for 3 years almost. And what really can help with that is long-range strikes on depots, on weapon storages, on their airports and air bases where they launch their glide bombs from, and cruise missiles. So that is the possibility for the Trump administration to show strength and end the war on a position of strength from the United States. It must not be only Ukrainian position of strength, because Ukraine has invested almost everything we have here in this war.
I agree with you, and I know that senior, now retired military figures like Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, one of Ukraine's greatest supporters and a person who I listen to with every opportunity that I get. He's been calling for permissions to use anything and everything that can be provided to Ukraine in whatever way Ukraine believes it to be most effective. And it is exactly that. It's exactly the things that you've just listed. It is the long-range strikes on their storage dumps, on their logistics nodes, on their headquarters, their command and control points, their training grounds, their airfields, everything. And Trump might provide that authorization. We will have to see. And I've never made any secret of my disdain for the man for many, many reasons. But the one thing that is an integral part of his personality is he doesn't like to be perceived to be a loser. And that is how people are messaging him now. That is how people are framing the situation in Ukraine. If we back off, if we do not double down, then we will be on the losing side here. And he won't want that on his watch. So we'll see.
Well, that is even much more than just inspiring, because that seems like a strategy, like a to-go strategy. Thank you very much for being with us today. It was a great interview, and we're always welcome to see you in our studio. Thank you very much, Mr. Niland, and have a nice evening.
Thank you, and I look forward to coming back on again sometime soon.
Of course. Thank you very much. So that was Mr. Paul Niland in our studio, the founder of the Lifeline Ukraine mental health line help, and an expert in different questions. As you can see, stay tuned and subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much again, Mr. Niland. I'll tell Alexei to send you the video when it airs. It will air tonight. In Ukraine, it will be 4 in the morning.